I'm extremely worried. How does he expect these companies, David, to just shift production? Where does he think they're going to get the money to invest in building new plants?
We've got some bad news bears here. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today, we've got the auto industry on the brink of collapse. This does not look good considering 85% of the cars made in Canada get exported out of Canada. And of those exports, 85%, 93% are sold in America. And considering Howard Lutnick came out and said, you guys aren't completing cars, you're not putting them together, they will be made in America from now on, and only leaving the possibility of some parts being made in Canada, this industry could collapse. Lumber industry is also on the chopping block, pun intended. It's not as bad. It is strained. 67% of our lumber gets exported. 84% of that is going to America as well. Mark Carney's plan here of only dealing with steel and aluminum tariffs is backfiring badly. All of these industries need some serious help and quickly. Let's jump into this. So jumping over to CBC, they bring on the president of Unifor, and it doesn't look good for the auto industry. Will it completely collapse in Canada?
There is still no deal after the Prime Minister's second visit to the White House this year, and now there are new fears there may never be a deal when it comes to the auto sector.
The day after Carney was in the White House, Commerce Secretary to the U.S. administration came out and said that our Canadian auto sector should come second. Mark Carney has sold out our auto workers and failed them completely. We need a prime minister who will stand up and fight for auto jobs here and always.
Okay, we also heard this week that Canada's negotiators, they said that right now they're prioritizing quick deals on steel, aluminum, and energy. So what does this all mean for the auto sector? Well, Lana Payne is the national president of Unifor. She represents many of these auto workers.
I've been very worried since, the start of this year, since the start of this trade war. What I saw this week has me very concerned. And that's for auto workers, but also forestry workers. Both these sectors are in the crosshairs of Donald Trump, and they weren't given a priority status this week with the other sectors. And that has me extremely worried right now. Is if we're looking for quick sectoral deals, what we are allowing the president of the United States to do right now is pit one sector in Canada against another, workers in one sector against another. And if we're prioritizing areas that we know the U.S. needs in order to build things in their country, while sidelining the sectors where we build things in this country and not having them as a collective effort to push forward, that is a very big concern.
If you're in any of those sectors that are not steel and aluminum, who are under threat, you're extra worried because you're not mentioned as a priority sector.
With that, as I've been saying all along, what should have happened here is Carney should have come up with a big deal, a big, massive deal, and push it over to Trump, and Trump would look at it and say, wow, that is a great deal. It has to be a whole bunch of things. It should have been cutting the DST and all these different things. Critical minerals, the Keystone XL pipeline, getting rid of the supply management, letting America in on the dairy, all of that. Make the deal so big and lucrative that they would look at it and say, you know what, we can't pass this up. In exchange, get rid of all the tariffs, open us up to the American market, get all that stuff done at once. That way the Americans can't use one industry against another, because that's what we're seeing now. Carney's awful at this job, but he doesn't care. He's not trying to get a deal for Canadians. He's trying to get a deal for himself and his buddies, all his billionaire rich buddies, his banker buddies, his investor buddies. So that's how you have to look at this lens. Things are really heating up here. We got Doug Ford. He is absolutely having a meltdown. He doesn't like that Carney has basically abandoned him in Ontario, the auto sector. That entire sector getting hammered so hard right now. Lutnick came out from Trump's administration saying there's going to be no deal on autos. They will be built in America. And so now you've got Doug Ford here threatening to cut off the electricity again. He says energy. I'm assuming he's saying electricity. Also threatens to cut off critical minerals going down to America. He's playing this game again because it worked out so well the first time around.
As Canada hopes for relief on steel and aluminum tariffs, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is reportedly rejecting any possibility of a deal on the auto sector. Lutnick spoke virtually to a Canada-U.S. conference in Toronto today, and according to multiple reports citing sources and some of our own sources who were in that room, Lutnick says there will be no free trade deal without tariffs, that Canada should accept being second to the U.S. on autos, and that cars will be assembled in the United States, not in Canada. At that same conference today, Ontario Premier Doug Ford had this response.
I will put legislation in if he wants to destroy our auto sector and destroy our steel sector, and for Quebec, the aluminum sector. There won't be a grain of critical minerals going south of the border. There won't be one ounce of energy coming from Ontario, because you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use that cheap energy that we're selling to our American friends to be competitive, to sell products around the world. That's what we're going to do. I wouldn't want to do it, but that option's on the table.
So he's doing it again, threatening to cut off the electricity and not sell critical minerals. This isn't going to work out very well. And side note, look at this Eurasia Group. Mark Carney's wife works at this place or worked at this place. Same thing with AI Minister Evan Solomon, ex-CBC host that got fired because he was doing dirty art deals. That's just a little fun fact we've got from the Liberal Party. If you want to check it out for yourself, I know there's a bunch of Liberals watching. I got a whole video on it right here. You can just click on this, moosechart.com, watch it for yourself. Evan Solomon got fired for his dirty art dealing. One of those deals was with Mark Carney.
The auto sector is a priority, though, Lana Payne, is in the White House. You saw what the president said. You've seen, I'm sure, the reports of Howard Lutnick and what he said in this supposed to be private session as he spoke to people at the Canada-U.S. summit in Toronto, where he said auto assembly is going to be done in the U.S. and Canada needs to figure out what it's going to do instead. I mean, what's your reaction to those comments from the Commerce Secretary?
Well, there are things that I can say here to you, David, on air, and there are things that I can't say on air. These are ridiculous statements from Lutnick, and partly because we've had an auto industry in this country for well over 100 years. We're going to continue to have an auto industry. We just need our government to fight for it. And I'm pretty sure that Mr. Lutnick doesn't understand how integrated this auto industry is. There are tens of thousands and thousands of workers in the United States who build parts that go into cars into Canada. What is he expecting those workers to be doing? And how does he expect these companies, David, to just shift production when they are facing billions and billions of dollars in tariffs? Where does he think they're going to get the money to invest in building new plants and new machinery in the U.S. when they're taking it from them in tariffs every single day?
It doesn't really work unless you're building a new vehicle and deciding to build all of it in America, because these supply chains, you can't just snap your fingers and quickly set up a machine factory that makes certain things that are only being made in Canada, quickly do that, have that set up in America. It's not going to work. And as she said there, our prime minister has to fight for us. That's not happening. You see it obviously in the auto industry. There's no mention. Don't see it at all in the forestry industry, including with David Eby, the premier of BC. He doesn't fight for the forestry industry either. In fact, he's actually been hurting it since he took over from John Horgan. We're seeing stuff like this. Roots of BC's forestry decline homegrown. At least 35 sawmills have closed their doors since 2017. 35 sawmills. In the town I live, they've shut down 2, along with a number of pulp and paper mills. Logging companies and their employees have suffered blow after blow under the stewardship of the NDP. Tens of thousands of good family supporting jobs have disappeared across the province's forestry value chain. Around here, the logging jobs, the forestry jobs, a lot of people who held these back in the 60s and 70s were high school students, and they were driving fancier cars than a lot of grown-ups at the time, middle-aged people working in other industries, because they were making so much money. They're driving fancy cars to school when they're 17 or 18 years old in high school. And that's continued for decades. And now we're seeing this where the forestry industry gets hammered. If you watch the channel here for a long time, sometimes I'm dogging on the forestry industry because it needs some reworking. The way they do these big clear cuts, no rhyme or reason. They don't thin the forest. They look hideous. They're awful for tourism, but that's an easy fix. We need wood. Obviously, houses and a bunch of stuff are made from wood. So we should be supporting our logging industry. Yet David Eby and the BC NDP have absolutely decimated it. 2024 study commissioned by the BC Council of Forest Industries estimated the forest sector collectively accounts for $17.4 billion. Just think of how big that would be if they didn't shut down 35 sawmills. Some of these sawmills get dismantled and sent over to China and then rebuilt. We've got this one here. Press release: BC's failing forest promise exposed. Raw log exports rise while mill shutdowns and tariff threats soar. Shocking drone footage from a massive cargo ship loaded with raw logs off the coast of Vancouver Island has gone viral. I see it every day. I live right next to them. I could go down there right now and show you one of these ships. They get loaded up to the gills and they're sent over to Japan, to China, full of logs, where then they will mill those logs, creating jobs over there. They basically cut our trees down here and then create the jobs and the final product and sell it over there. It's ridiculous. We should be cutting the trees here, milling the trees here, and selling the final product from here.
Yeah, but Lana Payne, is it a question of they don't understand or they don't care? Because that's where I'm landing.
It's probably both.
Yeah.
It's probably both, but that's also very dangerous because American workers are at risk here right now. And this is why it's so critically important for us not to try to make quick deals on certain sectors and isolate other sectors. We are supposed to be all in this together. And this is what has me very worried, that we're going to use up a lot of leverage, and then we are left with sectors that don't have a deal. And what leverage will we have left at that point as a country to use in order to make sure that we get good deals for them? So, yeah, I'm concerned about the approach we have right now. And I would say what I've been saying all along, we're better off not having a deal than we are having a bad deal. And it doesn't make it a good deal just because it's a deal that's better than a bunch of other bad deals. That is not the path we need to take.
Yeah, so we need to have one deal that gets rid of all of the tariffs, making it better for all Canadians in all these affected industries. Unfortunately, we don't have a prime minister acting in our best interest.
We have to use our leverage. We have to use our strengths. As President Trump wants to destroy our auto sector, take down our steel sector, go after our manufacturing sector, but we can't sit back and let President Trump continuously increase tariffs and the Prime Minister's decreasing tariffs. That doesn't cut it.
Doug Ford seeing his political dreams here evaporate. If he looks like a loser here and he's not winning for the province of Ontario, he might lose his seat eventually if Ontario ever gets any good candidates. They'll always have Muskoka. Ford needs a mental health break. His TDS is manifesting into psychological rage.
And of course, the premiers in particular are feeling some of this heat in their economy from various sectors. But the average Canadian, I think, is also feeling this sense of uncertainty and looming concern over the impacts that it's having in the economy, because they're living it. They're living the cost of living. They're living the sense of cost of everything going up. And that's where the political pressure, of course, is coming on the Prime Minister, in addition to having to stand up in question period and admit that he didn't come away with a deal. There are all of these other economic pressures, and even some sectors, David, that haven't been touched yet. I think of the dairy sector in particular, and that's always been this looming threat. And so while the meeting itself optically was good, body language, people have parsed every word and every hiccup and gesture, but the end of the day was we didn't get any relief from these tariffs. And in fact, the moment that the Prime Minister stepped off the plane, he was informed, I'm sure, if not before, that there was another tariff being slapped on trucks. The bite that will ultimately happen in the United States, and the heads of various industries that are interconnected, of course, through supply chains, these impacts are going to be felt in the United States as well, plus the looming elections that are coming here that may shift some of that power away from the president, the unilateral power that he seems to be prepared to use in most instances.
Canadians are feeling it, especially auto workers or forestry workers, anyone involved in this. And just think, Mark Carney could have got a deal by now. Other countries have gotten deals. The UK's already done two. He could have got a deal. Japan's done one. He just doesn't want to. He protected supply management behind law so that wouldn't be negotiated. And there it is, front and center as one of the big topics. And that's probably why we're not getting a deal here. He's protecting his rich buddies in specific industries that probably Trump and his team are targeting, like the dairy industry.
You can correct me on the town, but I remember back during the election, one of the announcements from the president happened. You were meeting with Mark Carney. I remember you having a press conference together. I think it might have been Kitchener. I think it was in southwestern Ontario.
It was,
right?
It was Kitchener.
And you were very much side by side at that moment. It doesn't sound like you're side by side. I don't know if you feel let down by the Prime Minister or if you're still fully supporting him, if you just need some information and reassurance. Like, where are things right now with you as the head of Unifor in terms of your relationship with the Prime Minister and his team at this point?
This is so icky to watch. David Cochrane trying to mend things over. You just need a little reassurance with old Carney there. He's a good guy. Don't worry. He'll fix things. Don't worry. What do you need?
Well, I want to make sure that the government is doing what it needs to do to get the best deal for all workers. We have an industrial economy right now that is at risk, and we need to feel assurances, and more than that, consultation, all the things that we need to be doing in this moment to make sure that we are protecting working people. But right now, what I will say to you is I have a lot of members who are very, very worried, and that means pressuring the government to do the kind of deal that I know is necessary to protect them.
We heard from Flavio Volpe yesterday how worried he is. Wab Kinew said he doesn't quite understand what Canada has gotten from some of the concessions that the government has made on digital services tax and dropping counter tariffs. And Doug Ford says he feels like Canada's not hitting back enough. That, he said this week, if the Prime Minister knows something the premiers don't, he should let the premiers in on what is happening.
Even on the CBC, they're mentioning that Wab Kinew, Doug Ford are not happy with how Carney's handling things. This is the woke CBC, so this is going to be getting out to people that things are not so chipper. This interview is pretty scathing, like putting a picture on how bad this auto industry situation is. This industry may collapse if Carney doesn't do something, and quick.
It's like a kid going to the schoolyard and getting punched in the face every day. It's time to hit back if he can't get a deal. Maybe Prime Minister Carney knows something I don't know. And if that's the case, he should sit down with the premiers and explain that.
What did we get for those concessions that we made as a country to the U.S.? You mentioned a few points there. Like, did we then see them back off any tariffs as a result? I'm not aware of any.
We just need to be clear that if we're going to move ahead as a country in negotiations with the Americans, we're not leaving anybody behind. That can only be confirmed by the Prime Minister. The industry just needs the assurance from the government that we're not going to do that.
Where are you on that? Do you think there's enough information flowing to the key industries that are affected? Because it sounds like some of the premiers are getting worried, and it sounds like you and Flavio and others share that concern.
I'm extremely worried, David. I hear what the premiers are saying. I talk to Premier Ford regularly, talk to Premier Eby today because we have a joint interest in making sure the forest sector is protected. It is in a massive crisis. And I believe that there's reason for concern and that we need to have a proper Team Canada approach here. And industry is also worried. I talk to them every single day. Forestry companies, auto companies, you name it. I'm on the phone with them. And the reality is that this week was concerning for a lot of people.
What if a win isn't possible for Canada here? Because it seems like the sectoral tariffs could be dragged out right up until the beginning of the CUSMA renegotiation to try to weaken the economy and the political strength of the country as the bigger conversation starts to happen.
That might be Trump and his team's strategy here, is to drag this out, weaken us, and then try to redo CUSMA, even though it's an evaluation, it's not a renegotiation. But I mean, with Trump, anything goes. He might just rip up the whole thing and say he wants to redo it completely and then put tariffs on everything. We don't know.
Are you worried there isn't a win right now with the way the Trump White House is acting?
I believe we cannot be conditioned into taking a bad deal. And I believe that the United States is starting to feel the pressure of the tariffs that they have put on Canada. Aluminum tariffs alone are causing them a lot of grief in their manufacturing sector. Their own economic conditions are deteriorating daily. We need to let the cake bake here a little bit, David. And whatever we can do to make sure we're turning up the heat as well would be very helpful because the conditions will improve for Canada in order to be able to get a good deal, given what's happening in the United States right now.
So they are seeing some increases, like on a pickup truck. I think it's $9,000 more that they're seeing because of the cost of steel and aluminum and all the tariffs back and forth. But I think the American people are willing to eat those prices. I guess it just depends. How far does it go before the American people say enough is enough? So this is interesting here. They talk about the $1 trillion comments that Mark Carney made in the Oval Office. And immediately David Cochrane going into cleanup mode here, trying to help his buddy Mark Carney.
It's when I was watching Pierre Poilievre's questioning and the Prime Minister's response, it looked to me like Poilievre was tipping his pitches and was getting ready to throw junk. And I mean that in that it was really just meant as subterfuge. It was meant to slow down the Prime Minister. You knew what was coming. You knew it was going to be, the usual kind of twist and manipulation of what, in fact, was meant to be said. I don't know that it was particularly effective. I thought the Prime Minister batted it back fairly effectively. I thought that he saw it coming.
I don't agree with this at all. I think it's a very bad look for Carney. Him saying that $500 billion has gone down to America in the last 5 years, going up to $1 trillion in the next 5. That looks awful. I think that's more of a Freudian slip of Mr. Banker here. I mean, what has he been doing the last 4 or 5 years? He was at Brookfield. He's managing assets. He's looking at assets and where they're spending money. Chair of Brookfield Asset Management. So was this a Freudian slip of them spending money in America? And then he's still talking to Bruce Flatt on a daily basis, say, okay, what assets, what are we moving around here? What are we going to buy? What are we going to do? Let's strategize. And then he went to the Oval Office and just kind of talked as if he was in that position and not in the role of Prime Minister. That's what that looked like to me. So it's a valid question that Pierre brings up. What are you talking about? You promised money to America coming from Canada, private sector. Is it pension money? It's a valid question ask, what did you mean by that? Because you're promising something will be written into the agreement.
And I thought that he, in the process, had responded fairly well. Now, the question will be whether, and I leave this to communications experts, whether that does in fact get traction. I thought it was pretty clear that the $1 trillion, and the Prime Minister's response is, there's this thing called the private sector, that was simply a tabulation of really kind of what Canadians invest in the U.S. over that time period anyway.
It wasn't a good response at all. Carney's responses the last few days have just been really snarky, egotistical, because Trump basically dunked on him in the middle of the White House session. I couldn't show it on the channel. I always get in trouble when I talk about the T word. The first part of the word of transformational. There's a moment there where he mentioned woke and the T word, probably full well knowing that Mark Carney has a daughter or son that switched genders, completely dunking on the guy. Was it dirty tactics? Probably. Was he trying to shake him off his ground and that's how he's negotiating? Probably. So Carney comes back with no deal. Trump dunked on him in that meeting. And sure, he praised him and all this stuff. That's what he does. He does a tug of war. He gives some and they post. It's basically trying to shaking the person out of their comfort zone. And Carney seems to just be lashing out because of that. His ego is not used to getting stomped on.
I don't know that any of that is really going to stick. And I think what Canadians are doing right now is sitting back. I do think they're very uneasy. There is a lot of trepidation. There's huge concerns about what's happening in the economy, but none of the parties are really laying out a direction of what they think that future looks like.
So listen to David Cochrane trying to defend Carney in this situation and diffuse this.
Peter MacKay, if the idea that the Prime Minister went to the Oval Office and gave away $1 trillion, if that takes root, because, social media is going to social media and there's going to be amplification of these things and real news is not allowed on the Meta platforms and these things. I mean, what does that do?
Yeah, and why is real news not allowed on Meta platforms? Because the Liberals banned it. That's why.
To the Canadian position, whoever is in charge, it is a false claim. And if that gets traction, could it undermine your position as a government dealing with a hostile power?
How is it a false claim? Mark Carney made that claim. He said that would be written into a deal with the U.S. What is the false claim here?
Well, it's like trying to hold back the tide, David. I mean, social media has become such a burning dumpster, and I think a lot of people don't take half of what they see there anymore. And that's without even talking about the pernicious influence of AI. But I think the private sector...
I agree with that. The AI does really muck up the situation. But the dumpster fire is not necessarily social media. There's definitely some dumpster fires. You look on X. There's crazy leftists posting just outrageous stuff on a daily basis. Anger mongering every single day. But it comes down to the dumpster fire is in mainstream media. And the lack of honesty and transparency. The lack of facts, paid off media. It's deplorable. Media shouldn't be getting money from the government, period. That's the only way to keep it honest.
Investment issue in Canada is a big one, and I hearken back to the earlier reference to pipelines, which that's part of this debate as well. Can we get a private sector proponent, or is this going to be something that the federal and provincial government of Alberta are going to have to lead? And I think, honestly, that pipelines did not make their way into the discussion in Washington and at the Oval Office by mistake. I think this is actually a major leverage point for Canada potentially in these discussions to bring energy into this discussion in a real way.
The only way this happens, which it may, is if this oil is decarbonized going from Alberta down to America. Because then that way Mark Carney can get his green grift carbon credit system up and running. That industry, if you want to call it that, isn't up and running. It's barely working in the UK. They're desperately trying to do it there. And he wants to get that going here because he's invested at the ground level with Stripe.